Hey, friends. Welcome to the Black Docket. I'm your host, Tammy, bringing you stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat, mind racing, and looking for a conclusion. Before we begin, a heads up the tales told on the docket can get pretty intense, from chilling murder, mysteries, and stories of survival and justice, and sometimes a little scam. We're diving deep into it all, so consider this your trigger warning. Shit gets dark. But remember, this just isn't any true crime podcast. So settle in, grab your favorite snack, and join me on this journey. This is the Black Docket Crime Chronicles, where every story is told with heart, humor, and a celebration of Black voices. Boom. Between 1979 and 1981, nearly 30 Black children and young adults were murdered in Atlanta. Yet for years, questions have lingered. Was the real killer brought to justice, or was the community failed again? Welcome to the Black Docket, where we tell true crime stories the mainstream media too often forgets or ignores. Today, we're diving into the Atlanta child murders, a series of crimes that shook the Black community, exposing racial bias in policing and long-lasting scars. This is my hometown, my neck of the woods. I wasn't born then, but I've heard a lot of stories about it. So thank you for being here with me. You guys could have been anywhere in the world, but you chose to be here with me. And I am so thankful. So let's get into it. Picture it. Atlanta, late 70s, early 80s, and the city was at a crossroad, emerging as a hub for Black political power and cultural pride, yet grappling with the legacy of segregation, economic divides, and rising crime. From the rise of Maynard Jackson, the first Black mayor, to the hunting of these here child murders, this was a time of resilience, tension, and transformation. Join me as we explore how Atlanta balanced its identity as the city too busy to hate with the struggles of the city's influx. Now, y'all, like I said in the intro, it gets dark. So we are talking 30 victims here. Do you know you got 30, you guys? So I just asked to roll with me, stay with me. If you need to take a break, take a puff, take a sip, please feel free to do that. But we rocking and rolling, and let's get to it. I'm going to tell these stories in the orders in which the bodies was found, not necessarily who went missing first. So the first known victim was 14-year-old Edward Smith. On July 21st, 1979, he vanished. Soon after, more young boys began to disappear all across Atlanta, all Black, all from low-income neighborhoods. Police was slow to act, dismissing the case as runaways or street kids. But the families knew better. Something was happening in their community. These are their life stories as I was able to piece them together. Here we go. Walk with me. Let's save space and let's tell their stories. Edward Hope Smith, aka Teddy, age 14, lived on Kimberly Court and attended Therrell High School. Teddy was last seen on Campbellton and Fairburn after leaving Greenbrier skating rink with his girlfriend on Saturday, July 21st, 1979. Some people reported that he was at a pot party. Y'all, I don't know what a pot party is, but I feel like it was just a party. They had some joints in rotation. And what's a party without a few party favors? His body was found on July 28th. He was found by an old lady simply out in the middle of nowhere looking for cans on Niskey Lake Road. Teddy was known to be over this way at a house where he hung out and practiced karate. He was found with a .22 caliber shotgun wound to his upper back. He was found with a black and red jersey. Y'all, I feel like my boy was wearing a Falcons or Georgia jersey that day he went missing, looking real snazzy, looking real good for his girlfriend. As I said, I'm from Atlanta, and the red and black runs deep around these parts, y'all. We live it, breathe it, love it. We love it. Apparently, it took a month for them to find Teddy's body on this field in Niskey Lake Road. Our next victim is Alfred James Evans, aka Q. He was from Eastlake Meadows, where he lived with his mom, Lois, and he attended Drew Elementary School. He played basketball and boxed at Warren Memorial Boys Club, as well as the Eastlake Meadows Community Center. He often watched boxing matches at the Municipal auditorium. A young man named Randy Heath was the last person who saw Q, and he told the police that he had given Q a ride to the bus stop on Glenwood Road around 3 or 4 o'clock that evening because Q said he was on his way to the Cornet Theater. And this was on Wednesday, July 25th, 1979. After it was known that Q was missing at the same time that Errol was missing, it was rumored that Q was also at this pot party that Teddy was at. So that's definitely a connection there. Randy Heath, who was the last person to see Q, his mom was the president of the East Lake Meadows Tenant Association. And when everything came out, she said that she had previously ran into Wayne Williams, the guy of this story, but she said that she ran into Wayne Williams and she told him to get out of her apartment complex. She didn't want to see him over there because he was handing out flyers to kids in the neighborhood so they can join his group. He was a producer. Wayne said he took the advice. He never went back, but what he did do was go to Moreland Avenue Shopping Center, where he hired a young man to go back to those same apartments to distribute the flyers for him. Now, if this is the case, I think he chose the boy because the boy was from the area. The boy was probably familiar with the kids. So, one, he was getting paid to do it. And also, that was a legitimate way for the kids to trust the person. Q was found on Niskey Lake Road with Teddy on July 28th, 1979. His cause of death was probably asphyxiation by strangulation. Q's identification took over a year for them to find him and for them to be able to say, yes, this was him, this is who it was missing. It took a year, y'all, 1 whole year. Because when they first found Q, they told his parents that it wasn't him. It wasn't him. For whatever reason, his dental records didn't match up the first time, and then they mysteriously matched up a year later. They found him wearing all black and an unfamiliar belt. Our next victim is Milton Harvey. He was 14 years old and he lived on Nash Road with his mom Patricia and his stepdad Roy. He attended Harper High School. Milton was last seen at Citizens Southern Bank on a yellow 10-speed bike about 3 miles away from his house. He was in the process of taking a $100 check to pay a credit card bill for his parents. Milton had stayed home this day because his mom purchased the wrong size shoes for him. It was the start of school. It was the first day of school, actually. And his mom purchased the wrong size shoes for him, so he couldn't fit them. So she had plans on returning them that evening for his correct size. So he just had an extended summer break, right? So she sent him to the bank around 10:30 Tuesday morning on September 4th, 1979. A man that was working for a drilling company said that he had seen 2 boys pushing bikes around noon around the area in which Milton went missing. A week later, a neighbor found Milton's bike tied to a pine tree near the Charlie Brown Airport, which was about 1 mile away from Milton's home. While Milton was missing, conversation was had with a man in prison who informed the police that a 27-year-old, 6'3" homosexual who was into handcuffs and whips and also liked violence should be looked into as a suspect in Milton's disappearance. Foreshadowing, I'm gonna let y'all know that never happened. They took this, he said it, they never looked into it, it was whatever. 2.5 months later, Milton was found 10 miles away on the south side by a man picking up cans in a garbage dump. When they found Milton, he was missing his knee-length socks with stripes on the top and his blue sneakers. His cause of death was undetermined, and Milton's case is actually also still unsolved to this day. Next, we have Yusef Ali Bell. He was 9 years old from the McDaniel Glen Housing Authority, where he lived with his mom, Camille, his sister, Tanya and Marie, and his brother, Jonathan. Y'all, I'm gonna try to stay on track and not get sidetracked, but reading this is so unfortunate because I literally just moved from this area maybe a year ago. And just to roll down those streets every day and know that people that look like me, people that could look like my brothers, people that can look like my cousins were being haunted. And that's so crazy. But okay, now back to the story. Yusuf was in the 5th grade at Dunbar Elementary and also went to Warren Memorial Boys Club. And that's the same boys club that Q boxed at. And also, just keep in mind that a lot of these stories overlap. A lot of these victims knew each other. A lot of these victims also went to the same places. Yusuf was last seen at the intersection of McDaniel and Fulton Street getting into a blue car after going to the local corner store to buy snuff for his neighbor, Miss Birdsong. 3 black men were questioned. The witness who saw Yusuf get into the car said the driver looked like Yusuf's father, John Bell. Camille, his mother, said this witness was untrustworthy because she had a drinking problem. John had always insisted that Yusuf would be found safe. This witness testimony, John was dragged down to the station where he had to take a polygraph test, and John failed it. But as we know, polygraph is monkey math science, it's not real, and polygraphs are not reliable. But to the dismay of Miss Camille as well as John, Yusuf was not found alive. Yusuf's body was found at an abandoned school by a janitor who was looking for a place to use the bathroom. And in this abandoned school, he decided the best place was in a crawl space. And in this crawl space is where Yusuf's body had been laying. He was found with the brown cutoff shorts he was last seen in, with a piece of masking tape stuck to his shorts. He had been hit over the head twice, and the cause of death was listed as asphyxiation by manual strangulation. Our next victim is Miss Angel Latrice Lanier, age 12. She attended Venetians Hill Elementary School, lived with her mom Venus and her father Richard and her sister Rhonda, and she also had a brother named Robert. She left her home wearing a denim outfit around 4 p.m. She was last seen at her friend's house where they were watching Sanford and Son. This was on March 4th, 1980. Shortly following Angel being reported missing, 2 men were questioned, one of which who wore a belt made of electrical cord, who had once been arrested for grabbing a child. It is speculated that while Angel was missing, she was being held at one of 2 houses in the neighborhood of her friend. Angel's body was later found in a wooded lot on Campbellton Road, 3 blocks away from her apartment. You guys, I feel like she was almost home. She almost made it back to safety. She was found 6 days later on March 10th in the same cute little denim outfit she left home in, with some random white panties stuffed in her mouth and electrical cord tying her wrist. Her cause of death was listed as asphyxiation by ligature strangulation, and Angel's case is still considered unsolved. Jeffrey Lamar Mathis, age 11, lived in the West End neighborhood with his mom, Willie Mae Mathis, along with his 5 siblings, Ronald, Reginald, Frederick, Valerie, and Wanda. Jeffrey attended Joel Chandler Harris Elementary, and it said that he would sometimes go to the local Kroger grocery store to help customers carry groceries for money. You know, hey, Miss Susan, let me help you carry those groceries to your car. I'll do it for $1, $2. And at 11 years old, my boy was rich. He was making money. Around 7 o'clock on Tuesday, March 11th, 1980, Jeffrey was last seen leaving the local service station. He was wearing gray jogging pants, brown shoes, and a green and white shirt. A barber at the local shop said he saw Jeffrey knock on the shop's window. He didn't answer. We don't necessarily know why he was knocking, but we do know that he knocked. Months following Jeffrey's disappearance, a girl said she saw him get into a blue car with a light-skinned man and a dark-skinned man near the area. A witness named Willie Turner said he saw Jeffrey in a blue Chevy Nova nearly 2 weeks after he went missing. He said he saw him across the street from the Stuart Lakewood Shopping Center. Willie said he was later held at gunpoint by the driver of this same Chevy Nova on March the 23rd over on Campbellton Road. It took 11 months to find Jeffrey's body. And when they did, he was located in another wooden area on Campbellton Road. At this moment, the FBI was called in with canine dogs, and this is how they were able to find his body. I have the letter that they wrote to the FBI asking for help. I'm going to post that on the socials just so you guys can see it. But because it took so long to find him, his cause of death couldn't be determined, and a positive identification took some time, with many speculating it was the body of a later victim, Darren Glass. Our next victim is Eric Middlebrooks. Sometimes, you guys, you hear stories and it breaks your heart, and Eric Middlebrooks is that one for me. Eric was 14 years old, and he had just moved to this new neighborhood with his foster parents, Robert and Evelyn Miller. 3 months before he went missing. He was new to this neighborhood. Yeah, I know 3 months is a long time in kid age, but he was new. It was the summer. His biological mom, Charlene, gave him up when he was just 4 months old and moved to North Carolina. Now, with this case, nobody survived. So I'm just going to foreshadow a little bit. She gave him up at 4 months. She moved to North Carolina, and she didn't show up to his funeral. Now, I'm kind of torn. Do I feel like she should have came? Yes. But she also gave him up at 4 months, and that pretty much says, I don't want to be a parent. So she probably felt like it was no need for her to come. And he never knew his dad. From my research, this was probably his second foster family, because a Miss Lucille Brown was also listed as his mother. He attended Roosevelt High, and he hung out at the local boys club to swim. He was last seen on Sunday, May 19th, answering the phone at his home and hurrying off with a hammer in his hand to go fix his bike. He was never seen again. A few weeks before Eric went missing, he had just testified against 3 other kids in a robbery case. So some speculate that these kids went back and killed Eric. I don't think that. Could kids do it? Yes. Are kids capable of killing? Yes. Do I think kids killed Eric? Absolutely not. Eric was found the next day next to his bike in the back garage of Hope You Like It Bar. When he was found, his pockets were turned inside out, and he had slight stab wounds on his chest and arms that were post-mortem. So he was stabbed after he was dead. His cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. And for our next victim, in the same way you can be heartbroken with the story, in turn you can turn around and be pissed the hell off, because the story of Christopher Richardson may do just that. 12-year-old Christopher Felipe Richardson also lived in Eastlake Meadows. He lived there with his grandparents. He attended Harper Alexandria Elementary, and he was last seen outside of Crystals as he was headed towards Midway Recreation Center to go for a swim. Now, as I told y'all, I was not born around this time, but my mom was, and she said that Midway is where she and her brothers and her cousins, this is where they hung out. This is where they spent their time when they weren't in school, away from school. This was the hangout spot. So listening to these kids, listening to these stories, this could have been my mom. Like, this could have been my uncle. This could have very well much been somebody in my family that these stories were about. Like, you just feel it every time. Every time I tell one of these stories in one of these places, it just feels like these could have been my people. Okay, y'all, I'm gonna stop chatting. Back to the story. He was headed towards Midway for a swim. He was wearing blue shorts, a light blue shirt, and blue shoes on Monday, June 9th, 1980. Chris was missing for 7 months. He was found on Red Wine, where police had found Milton Harvey's body. Chris was found because a man that lived close to this area had reported that his dog had gotten into something, and when the dog came back to the house, it smelled really bad. Like, yeah, my dog stink, but it smells like my dog was in something that it shouldn't be in. But neighbors didn't have to call or seek the police. Nope, not at all, because they were already in the area looking for Luby Jeter. We'll get to Luby Jeter in a minute, y'all. Also, Earl Terrell was also found in this area. Here we go. But because his body sat for so long, it was now new bodies in this here killing field. And while I'm already spilling the juice, it will also be another body that was found in this field as well. We're going to call this the killing field on Redwine. So during the investigation, each of the three bodies were missing some part of their clothing. The investigators accidentally left behind body parts at the scene, including teeth. Now, mind y'all, in the earlier case, I told y'all they misidentified because they said that the dental records were wrong. Even in 1980, leaving physical teeth at a scene is so preposterous, but that's what they did. They left the teeth. The boys' cause of death couldn't be determined. It was items found in the killing field, such as a shotgun shells, a penthouse magazine, a gallery magazine, cigarette butts. Anybody decide to pick the cigarette butts up, test it for I know back then they couldn't say, yes, this cigarette butt belongs to John Doe, but they could say, hey, it's a white man, it's a black man, it's a man, it's a woman. They could have did something, but you know what they did? They left them cigarette butts right there. And a magnetic recording tape. Fingerprints from the magazines were matched to someone the police did not consider a strong suspect in this case. A little bit more foreshadowing. Them fingerprints did not belong to Wayne Williams. And also, I don't believe that magazines just end up in fields. So I think whoever fingerprints those are should have been talked to. But we digress because they were not. I searched low and high and couldn't find who those prints belonged to. I really want to know. It was reported that Chris was found in red swimming trunks and not the blue ones that he had left his house in 7 months earlier. The investigator also first reported that his teeth, again, didn't match his dental records. What do you mean they did not match? This was indeed who these boys were. It's just a lack of care that was given to these black boys in 1980. Our next victim is LaTanya Wilson. 7-year-old LaTanya Wilson attended Jones Elementary. She had 4 siblings who all lived in the Hillcrest Heights complex with their parents Clarence and Ella Wilson. The story goes that LaTanya was abducted by 2 men from a second floor window. Okay, cool. Second floor window. She was wearing a slip and white panties. A neighbor named Gladys Durden said she saw 2 men climb into this second floor window 4 times, you guys. 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Uno, dos, tres, cuatro. After the first time, that's your neighbor. I'm sure that you knew those kids. If you knew there wasn't the daddy, the brother, something should have happened. You shouldn't have just watched them shimmy up the floor 4 times. Now for this to happen, the man would have had to climb over her brother's bed because that's whose window it was. So the criminal would have had to climb over the brother's bed and walk past the parents' room to get to LaTanya. Once they were in the house, however they got in there, the person then left out the back door, leaving it ajar. Miss Gladys, the same Miss Gladys that watched that man climb up that second floor building 4 times, witnessed the man talking to another man in the parking lot with LaTanya in his arms. Nathaniel Cater is suspected to be one of the men in the parking lot. Remember that name, Nathaniel Cater. Another neighbor said earlier that day he saw a random van with 2 men and a lady circling the block of the apartment. He lived next door and heard yelling and screaming coming from the Wilsons' apartment. A little while before, a maintenance man had been in the apartment to fix a broken window. This same man confessed to another murder and had pictures of his victims on his wall when he was arrested. And unfortunately, our girl LaTanya wasn't on that wall, you guys, thankfully. So while the maintenance man was a creep, we don't think he is the creep that murdered LaTanya. LaTanya's body was found at the end of the street in a fenced area. Her remains were skeletal when she was found, and because of that, her cause of death was undetermined, and LaTanya's case is still considered unsolved by the state. When I was watching the documentary, this part of the story really pissed me off because Yusef's bail mom started a task force. She started a task force. She said, y'all not looking for our kids. That's cool. Guess what? We gonna do it. And being resilient like we are as Black people, people by the hundreds started showing up to churches saying, you know what? We are gonna go look for our kids. Y'all don't want to find them? That's okay. We are going to go look for them. We are going to start our search parties by ourselves. Now, these searches they happened on Saturday. The Friday before, the police said, no, y'all don't need to go to that area. We just looked at that area. We didn't see a body. They were in this field that LaTanya was in for 15 minutes when they came up on her body. So either y'all were lying that y'all said that y'all went to this place and looked for her, or y'all drove by and said, hey, we looking for a body, and nothing happened from that. But either way, this baby should not have been in that field for that long. Let me breathe. Aaron Darnell Welch, a 10-year-old who lived in the Thomasville Heights with his mom, Linda. He also lived in the apartment adjacent to the Rogers family. Aaron was last seen at Tanner's Corner grocery store, getting into a blue and white Chevy with 2 black men. Now, this car is rumored to have matched the exact description of the car that tried to pick up children at Jeffrey Mathis's school. The kids recalled the license plate, which was registered to a car found with different plates on the same street in front of a house where Mathis' family reportedly first looked for him. Okay, enough backstory. Back to our boy Aaron. Female witness says she saw him being led from the grocery store by a 6-foot, 180-pound black man, about 30 years old, with a mustache and a goatee. She greeted Aaron. He acknowledged her as well, as if nothing was wrong. They got into the late 70s Chevy, where Aaron sat close to this man in the front seat. The witness also said she saw the man doing something with his hands in his lap, but they were in the car. She couldn't see. Around 7 p.m., he was seen again at the Moreland Avenue Shopping Center. Aaron's body was found under a bridge going over train tracks. He was wearing a red and black striped shirt with blue cutoff pants and high tops. The official cause of death was positional asphyxiation from a broken neck suffered during a fall. Anthony Carter was 9 years old, and he also lived in the West End with his mother, Vera Carter. He attended E.R. Carter Elementary and took odd jobs at the West End. He was last seen playing hide and seek with his cousin. The body of Anthony was found in a neighborhood dumpster, and he was found by people who worked close by. His cause of death was multiple stab wounds, and it's believed that he was transferred long after his death. Earl Lee Terrell, 10 years old, lived on Browns Mill Road with his mom, brothers, and stepfather. He went to Lakewood Elementary. He had been reported to have been at the house of John David Wilkins. John was a 50-year-old pedophile who lived near the Lakewood neighborhood. John had been a part of a child pornography ring, and he ran this ring for 15 years before he was caught. This ring included hundreds of Atlanta children through multiple counties. These men would take the children to their homes or a local hotel, where they would pay them $5 to perform sexual acts and $10 for. At some point, the no good police said they had pictures, and they had pictures of multiple of the missing boys. But when they went back to look at these pictures that they got from John's house, all of the pictures of black boys were missing, and the only pictures were left in police custody were pictures of white boys. Okay. So Earl was at this house with another boy who pretended to be his older brother. Earlier that day, Earl was last seen sitting outside of the South Bend pool after he was kicked out by a lifeguard. Now, I have a problem with this. If the police had did their job, and if the police had notified the neighborhood that, hey, little black boys are going missing, maybe the lifeguard would not have put Earl Terrell out of this pool and into harm's way. But guess what? The police didn't want to say anything, so the lifeguard was unaware. So unintentionally, they passed Earl Terrell right to his death. After he was kicked out of the pool by the lifeguard, he was spotted at his friend's house buying freeze pops at a grocery store 1 block from his house. And someone saw him crying on the corner near Jonesboro Road. Early on the morning of July 31st, 1980, a middle-aged white man with a southern drawl called Earl's house to say he had Earl in Alabama and asked for $200 by Friday, which is $760 in today's money. But nothing ever came of this call, and he was found with Christopher Richardson. Clifford Emmanuel Jones, age 12. He was simply in Atlanta visiting his grandma. Clifford and his brother Dwayne were often seen outside collecting cans. And on one of these can collecting trips, Clifford stumbled on a body of a murdered man. Cliff's brother Emmanuel said he was last seen helping a woman with her groceries. Cliff is where things get a little strange. So 3 kids at a laundromat witnessed the manager, James Jamie Edward Brooks, and a man named Calvin Strangle beat and carry Cliff's body to the trash. One witness named Freddie, age 19, said Jamie fondled and raped Cliff before he strangled him with a yellow rope. The police disregarded this because they said he was retarded. You guys, he gave so much detail. I read his police report. He gave so much detail on what these people did to this boy. So for them to write it off as he was retarded really made me upset. And obviously I know retarded was used often around this time, but I definitely think this should have been looked into. I don't care who told them, but as we know, the police did not look into it. He also said he washed him with soap and a rag and redressed him. 2 more witnesses saw a black man in a hooded robe walk from Jamie's house and place a large item in a plastic bin next to the dumpster, where he then made a phone call. The police responded to this anonymous phone call at this dumpster. A 4th witness claimed Jamie took Clifford and another man into his home where he saw the hooded robe. Cliff's body was found next to a dumpster by the same laundromat that Jamie worked. Bruises and cuts were found in his mouth. His underwear was missing, and he was wearing red and blue jogger shorts and white tennis shoes, neither of which belonged to his cause of death was listed as asphyxiation by strangulation. The man that claimed he spent time with Cliff and Jamie at Jamie's house, I also take everything he said with a grain of salt, because you are a grown man that's old enough to get in the club. Why are you spending the night with a 12-year-old? This man said he met Jamie at the Silver Dollar Saloon that night, but this particular witness has also met Nathaniel Cater, who will soon be a victim, and Michael McIntosh, who we will soon hear about as well. And he met these men at the Cameo Lounge. A little later, Jamie would be sentenced in another case where he was charged with aggravated assault with attempt to rape. He was released during that time because by this time the police had deemed it was Wayne Williams that was doing all of these things. So they said, oh, we have our man, let Jamie raping nasty pedophilic self back into the streets. So that's what they did. Jamie later died of AIDS, and I don't wish this on nobody, but I hope it was a hard death. Back to my boy Cliff. Cliff's death was attributed to Wayne Williams, but 5 witnesses didn't see Wayne. They saw Jamie. Darren Glass, 11 years old, lived with his foster mother, Fannie Mae Smith, and a sister that lived close on East Lake Drive, and his daddy uncle lived close too. Now, y'all, I don't know what a daddy uncle is. Could not find any great detail in my research on why he called his man daddy uncle. Darren was last seen getting off the church bus coming from a Braves game. That evening, his foster mother received an emergency call from Darren, but the line went dead. Darren went missing September 14th, 1980, and his foster brother Eric Carr had claimed to know where Darren was and had received calls from Darren as late as November of 1980. Darren is still missing, and his case is still considered unsolved. Charles Steffens, 10 years old, went missing from his home where he lived with his mother, father, and sister. He attended Perkinson Elementary, and y'all, this is another one that hit me because I too attended Perkinson Elementary. Charles was last seen at his home where he was watching TV and drawing. Charles' neighbor Jerome Clark said he saw Charles playing on his skateboard near the dumpster in front of his house. That day, Charles was to go over to his cousin's house. Around the same time Jerome saw Charles, he also saw a random man between buildings 1701 in 1704. When Jerome spoke to him like, hey man, how you doing? The man didn't respond. He just looked at Jerome. Jerome seen this same man the night they found Charles's body standing around looking, which is creepy. He told the police. Guess what? The police absolutely did not look into it at all. Charles's body was found on a grassy hill near the entrance of a trailer park. He was missing his shirt plus one of his shoes. Rub marks were found on his nose and his mouth. His cause of death was ruled as undetermined asphyxiation. The investigators determined that dog hairs and 2 Caucasian red hairs were found on Charles's body. 2 pubic hairs were found on his boxers, which was 950 feet away from his body. The pubic hairs didn't match him or Wayne Williams. Aaron Jackson, age 9, lived with his father, Aaron Jackson Sr., and his 2 other siblings. He attended Dobbs Elementary. Aaron was friends with the other Aaron Roach, as well as Patrick Roberts. Eric went missing from the Memorial Avenue Shopping Center. He was wearing a printed shirt, dark pants, and sneakers. Aaron's body was found on the banks of the South River beside the bridge. His body was missing socks, wearing blue jeans, a white shirt with brown designs, and black socks. His cause of death was asphyxiation by suffocation. Patrick Pat-Man Rogers. Now, y'all, this is Mr. Popular. Everybody knew Pat-Man, and Pat-Man knew everybody, okay? He was 16 years old, and he was from Thomasville Heights. He lived there with his mom, 3 brothers, and 4 sisters. He attended Grady High School. Pat-Man, like all the stories that we've heard, made extra dollars by carrying groceries around the Moreland Avenue Shopping Center. And because he worked at the Moreland Avenue Shopping Center, he knew both of the Aarons. He also spent a lot of time writing music with his friend Joe Harper. Y'all, I'm not sure how it was in your area, but my mama said back in the day, they would have these talent shows in each of the different neighborhoods. And these were full-blown productions. They were choreography, outfits, like a whole 9. And in my mom's apartment, she also participated in some of these stuff. I've seen her dresses. I've seen her performances. This is what they did. But usually the kids would stay in their neighborhood. Y'all, our boy Pat-Man, everybody hood. Walk in your trap, take over your trap. He was at all the talent shows, and I think that's why he was so popular, and that's how he knew so many people, because he said, show me your best rapper, singer, dancer, and I'm coming from Thomasville Heights, and I'm gonna put my apartments on the map. He also spent a lot of time writing music with his friend Joe Harper. Miss Annie, which is his mom, said that Pat-Man knew Darren Glass and future victims Luby Jeter and Curtis Walker. Pat-Man was last seen by his 7-year-old brother Isaac at the bus stop. Later that night, Mary Harper, the mother of his friend who he wrote music with, reported that Pat-Man was at her house sometime that night looking for her son Joe, because Pat-Man said a man wanted to record their songs. 1 week before, a black man who was said to be Wayne Williams was seen giving out flyers at the Thomasville Heights community. 2 days after Pat-Man was reported missing, a burglary arrest was issued. Let me say that again in case y'all missed it. 2 days after he had been reported missing, the Atlanta Police Department said, "No, he not missing. Go ahead and put a burglary arrest warrant." APD, did y'all just not try? Did y'all not care? What the hell was going on at this police department? We don't know. On a shocking hit to Rogers' family, Pat-Man's body was found on the Cobb County side of the Chattahoochee, and his body was caught on the rafter cables. His cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Now, y'all, this bridge that he was found on is right outside of my house. So every time I'm in the car and ride over that bridge, like, I just shake my head to know that all of these places I have been, these boys' bodies were just popping up, and it just makes it that more disheartening. His cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Luby Chuck Jeter, age 14, lived with his parents and 5 siblings. He attended MC Murray High and also carried groceries and worked at the National Pride Car Wash. Luby was last seen at the Stuart Lakewood Shopping Center. He was selling car deodorizers outside of the Big Star food store, where he was left there by his brother. People saw Chuck getting into multiple cars, a red pickup, a white pickup, and 2 different types of cutlasses. A lady testified that she saw Chuck get in the car with Wayne Williams in front of the Sears. When he went missing, he was wearing a purple coat, green shirt, blue jeans, and brown loafers. Once Chuck was reported missing, calls from a man calling himself the killer were traced back to payphones on Stewart Avenue. Chuck's body was found by a dog who was roaming in a field. The owner thought that he was destroying rabbit traps or stuff for possums. Nope, it was a body. His body was missing all of his clothes except white jockey shorts. His pants and belts were almost a mile away in a brown bag. His shirt and shoes were found 300 feet away from his body. His body was mutilated by more animals than just that dog. His cause of death was asphyxiation by manual strangulation. Teddy Lorenzo Pugh lived on Hollywood Road with his mom, Helen Pugh, and dad, Clarence Pugh. He had an older sister, Pamela, who lived in East Lake Meadows. He attended the Challenge School at East Hunter Street, and what seems to be normal in this story, he was buddies with Luby Jeter. They rolled tight. The day Terry went missing, his brother Tony saw him get on the bus on Hollywood Road around 3 p.m. That same day, Terry asked his friend Clinton to come play basketball, but Clinton passed because of the rain. Terry was last seen spending the night in the Crystals. Why was he sleeping at the burger joint? Y'all, I have no idea, but that's what he did. That night, he was trading bottles for money. The money he made, he used to get himself food. Terry's body was found in Rockdale County by a passerby on January 8th. An anonymous man called the cops to tell them that a body could be found in this area. The police claimed they went to the area and looked and searched high and low. We looking here, we looking there, we looking here, we looking there. All for them to say they didn't find anything. They came back empty-handed. The man then called them back again, claiming that he dropped another body in this same area and he was just there. Police claimed they went to the area and came up empty-handed. The man called back, taunting them, claiming that he dropped another body in this same area. They then went back and found Terry, but they didn't find the other body that he claimed he dropped. Do I think they looked? Absolutely not. Hey Tam, why do you think that they didn't look? Because a couple years later, a skeletal body was found in this area. I believe this is the body that that caller told them about that they couldn't find. Again, dog hair was found on his body. Abrasions were on his elbow and bruises were on his head. He was wearing a blue windbreaker with the name Kim in red lettering on the back in a denim jacket, a yellow t-shirt with a palm tree and Puerto Rico on the front and Washington High on the back. His family was able to identify his body because of the surgical scars on his right knee, and his cause of death was asphyxiation by ligature strangulation. Curtis Lamar Walker was 13 years old and lived in Bowen Homes with his mother and 4 sisters. The family had previously lived in Thomasville Heights. He attended A.D. Williams School and he was last seen wearing a brown and blue shirt, blue pants, and blue shoes. He was last seen at the Byron Gun Shop where him and his 8-year-old brother and picked up trash for money. They walked to a nearby shipping center and he was rumored to have been seen getting into a yellow car. Curtis' body was found on a log by a fireman crossing the South River, the same South River that Aaron Jackson was found in. A witness saw an old green Chevy parked by this river the Tuesday or Wednesday before. It was a mile away from a church where Reverend Earl Pope received a call in February from someone claiming to be the killer. His body was missing all of his clothes except his underwear. Latent prints were found on his body. We don't know anything about those prints. I'm going to step out on faith and say those prints didn't match Wayne Williams, because if they did, we would know. His cause of death was ruled asphyxiation by strangulation. Next victim is Joseph Jojo Eugene Bell. 15 years old, lived on Lawton Street with his grandmother, Miss Governor Smith, while his mother, Doris Bell, was in jail for killing his father, Big Jojo. He attended Booker T. Washington. Jojo was very active on how he spent his time. He would hang out at the Boys Club. He partied at the Dunbar Community Center. He worked at Captain Peg's Seafood and attended a radio class at the NFL PA camp at West Georgia College. The last day Jojo was seen, he was on his way to go play basketball with a friend at a court nearby. Eugene Lester seen Jojo get into a station wagon with Wayne. Before Eugene told this version of the story to the cops, he had spoken to Jojo's brother Edward the day of Jojo's disappearance. And at that time, the version of Eugene's story went a little like this. He didn't know the type of car or who was driving the car that JoJo got in. He just saw JoJo get in the car. That's what he told the first time. But when he talked to the cops, it just automatically turned into, I saw him get into the car with Wayne Williams. Get it, got it, good. JoJo was last seen wearing a blue skull cap and jogging sweatshirt, a green jacket, and brown baggy pants. This same afternoon, some random no-name person claimed to have seen Wayne at the South River. We don't know who said it. We don't know where it came from. We just know that it's a tip that the police got. Captain Peggs received a call from JoJo saying he was almost dead on March 7th. At 7 p.m., a woman called JoJo's mother twice, stating that she had JoJo. This investigation was tricky. We have a signed affidavit from someone who reported that someone other than Wayne murdered JoJo. JoJo was found by two bikers who were testing a new trail in Rockdale County near a sharp turn of the South River. Unlike the other bodies, JoJo's body was walked 2 miles into the woods on the river. He was found in only his underwear, and his cause of death was listed as undetermined asphyxiation. Timothy Lindell Hill, age 13. He attended Bean Rusk Elementary and lived on Shells Avenue with his mother and 4 siblings. His older brother Richard was the maintenance man at Thomasville Heights. His brother used to roll with Pat-Man, and Tim was friends with JoJo. Tim was connected. He also hung out with Patrick Balazar, who we'll talk about later, Anthony Carter, Jeffrey Mathis, and Alfred Evans. And his people lived across the street from Eric Middlebrooks. Hey, family. This case is going to deal with sexual assault and rape. So if that's too heavy, please feel free to fast forward ahead. I don't want to make this uncomfortable for anybody. I completely understand. Now, if you decided to stay with me, take a deep breath and let's ride. Wednesday, March 11th. Tim was in his backyard playing with his niece. He ended up leaving her there, and she saw him get into a taxi and saw a man put what looked to be mud on his face. We don't know who Tim got into that taxi with, but we do know that the next day, a 34-year-old man by the name of Frankie Millen said around 5 p.m. he had sex with Tim and another boy at a house by neighborhood pedophile Thomas Uncle Tom Terrell, age 63. Now, Thomas was a motherfucker, I tell you. It was known by Thomas's neighbors that he kept a bucket of some type of drug concoction in his house that looked like mud and that people would sniff to get high. Now back to Frankie. After he was done degrading these babies, he went to Thomas's real house. Thomas had 2 houses. He had his real house and he had the nasty freak-off house. He took these babies to the nasty freak-off house and then he went to Thomas's real house, which was just right next door. At 9 p.m., Tommy came over and asked if he could stay the night because he missed his last bus that would have taken him home. So he stayed the night with Thomas, Frankie, and some man named Curly. On the next day, he was seen around 4 p.m. standing on the sidewalk talking to a girl. Frankie said he saw at least 10 of the victims at either of Thomas Terrell houses. That Sunday, Tim was seen at a rally for missing and murdered children at Morehouse College. It's a little concerning because at this point, he still hasn't been back home. He went over on Friday, spent the night, stayed with the nasty man, went to the rally, and just didn't go back home. He was out and about that following Monday. His teacher, Miss Teresa Swindell, received 2 calls from him crying. These calls were later traced to northern DeKalb County. Tim was last seen wearing a black leather jacket, a shirt, yellow pants, brown shoes, and white socks and a hat. Now, Frankie, his sister, and his roommate was all in the investigation and talking to anybody who would listen. The sister said the police was walking around talking to JoJo about Tim's disappearance. Nothing wrong with that. But she was just running her mouth because by that time, JoJo had already been missing for 11 days. Now, Frankie's roommate, Larry, was a security guard at a telephone company near East Lake Meadows and also at the Salvation Army. Larry also had a son named Timothy Hill. Sometime when Tim was missing, Larry claimed Tim knocked on his door and handed him a letter and told him to leave Atlanta. And this letter was signed by a... Tim knocked on the door and handed him a letter that told him to leave Atlanta, and it was signed by a Rev EC. And give y'all a quick rundown of who Rev EC was. He was a man who claimed to have been an assistant pastor at a church, but the head pastor of the church said that was a lie. And he often dressed in a clown costume to raise money for Jeffrey Mathis. Rev EC was also found guilty of bootlegging music, and he also ran a bootleg preaching show on the TV. And last but not least, he was a neighbor to Nasty Thomas. Now, Larry picked up and went to Connecticut because he was told to leave Atlanta, where he went and started committing crimes in these people's neighborhood. He went up there and committed an armed robbery, and when the police got him downtown, he immediately told them that he had something to tell. Yeah, I'm sure he did. Now, while Larry was in Connecticut, the info was still coming in Atlanta. So a 15-year-old who knew Yusef said Larry took him to see Tim to have sex at Thomas's house. This boy also said Larry would take them to work with him at the Salvation Army to steal from the people. In one of these trips, Timmy came out crying, saying that someone had raped him inside. This incident happened on March 9th. 2 days before Tim was seen getting in that taxi. This witness said that he last saw Tim that day, and he said he was on his way to make $50 to wash some lady's dog. He also told that Larry would encourage homosexual relationships with other witnesses who lived in the area. So essentially, he would bring them to the neighborhood and auction them off to the men in the neighborhood, burn the whole neighborhood down, lock everybody up. The most profound thing this boy told the police was another suspect in this case, that's not Wayne Williams, told him that Timmy and other bodies would be found in the Chattahoochee River. And wouldn't you know it, Timmy was indeed found right there. This had been a dumping spot for murdered gay entertainers back in the 70s. So it looks like either this person crunk back up and started killing, or somebody that watched the news and knew that they were dropping bodies there decided to go back. Tim was missing all of his clothes except his underwear, and his cause of death was asphyxiation. Eddie Lamar Duncan, aka Bubba, was 21 years old, and he lived in Techwood with his mom. Now, before I get to running my mouth too much, I'm sure you guys heard that our boy Bubba was a grown man, and the first murdered slash disappearance that happened after Larry Hill went to jail. Larry went to jail, the victims became adults. Moving forward, all the victims are going to be 17 and older. Okay, so now that's behind us. Bubba was known to be acquaintances with Timmy Hill and Patman. Bubba worked in a small grocery store at the edge of his neighborhood and did random jobs at the barbershop. On the day he went missing, he got on the bus at 2 p.m. to go drop off some dry cleaning to his friend Calvin, who he was supposed to link up with later that day. Bubba didn't drop the clothes off until 6 p.m. and he never showed back up to link with Calvin. He was also supposed to meet his girlfriend Racine, and that also never happened. His homeboy Earl saw Bubba walking around 7 p.m. towards his house, and Bubba was shooting the shit, and he told Earl he had $20, and when he get back, they were going to go play some pool. Bubba's little brother, Ricky, heard that Bubba was going to help somebody move to South Carolina for $200. And the neighbor heard Bubba say he was getting $200 for helping somebody paint. Bubba was last seen at the game room. Someone also saw him get into the car with a light-skinned man near a restaurant by the house. Not sure which one of these sightings happened first, but we can assure that these were the last sightings of Bubba forever. Bubba's body was found in the Chattahoochee, just a few feet from where Timmy Hill was found just 24 hours earlier. He was missing all of his clothes except his boxers, and his cause of death was undetermined. Larry Eugene Rogers, age 20, lived on a Ezra Church Drive with his foster father, George. Larry was special needs, but always stood on big business. One time, Larry was chilling, and he heard that his younger brother was hit in the head by a 2x4. On the police scanner, Larry sprung into action and beat the police to the scene, where he took his brother to the hospital. In another incident, he hid his foster brothers in an apartment and took their biological mother to that apartment so she could see her boys. Just a good guy, right? Larry was last seen getting into a faded green Chevy station wagon with a light-skinned man. Neely Tramiel testified in the court of law that the light-skinned man that she saw was Wayne Williams. And how did Nellie T know that Wayne was the man, you ask? Because Nellie said she was a member of the True Light Gospel Church, and this church just so happened to be across the street from the house that Wayne Williams lived in with his parents. Nellie said, my church is across the street, so yeah, of course I seen him before. So the police go talk to the pastor. Pastor said he ain't never seen Nellie at no service he ever preached in that church house. No. Was Nellie lying? Was Nellie telling the truth? We don't know, but the pastor said she wasn't there. Larry was last seen wearing red and white tennis shoes with jeans and a windbreaker. Larry's body was found by police in the kitchen of a ground floor apartment. Outside of the building that Larry was found in was a stolen Buick Skylark that had been reported stolen on March 20. Dog hairs were found on his body, and he was wearing white swim trunks under blue jogging shorts with a blue shirt stuffed into the trunks. His cause of death was listed as asphyxiation by strangulation. 23-year-old Michael Cameron Mickey McIntosh lived on Windsor Street in a house he inherited from his adoptive mother. This house was located across the street from Captain Pegg's, and sometimes he did odd jobs there for a few dollars. He also worked for the Adaman Labor Pool, and he sometimes boxed with JoJo Bell. Mickey left Adaman on March 24th and never came back. Now, y'all, I think Mickey just decided that that day was his last day, and he told them people that he quit. That's what I think. That was the last day that Rent a Man saw Mickey, but his family said that they had seen him all the way up until April 1st. On March 25th, a man who ran an import shop on Bankhead said Mickey came into his shop crying and badly beat him. The man gave him $12 and pointed him to the direction of the nearest train station. He last saw him headed towards the Chattahoochee. And wouldn't you know it, his body was found where? In the Chattahoochee. He was found naked, and his cause of death was undisclosed asphyxiation. Jimmy Ray Payne was 21 years old, and he lived in the Vine City apartments. He was friends with none other than Mr. Popular himself, Mr. Patman. Jimmy was last seen in his apartment complex and was headed to the Omni, where he was going to sell some 1951 nickels to make a few dollars. He was wearing a red jogging suit and white tennis shoes. He was supposed to meet his girlfriend Catherine at the Vine City MARTA station that night, and he never showed up. 5 days after he didn't show up to meet Catherine, a man by the name of Fred White went to Captain Pegg's and tried to use Jimmy's ID as identification. I can't find a rhyme or a reason why he was in there trying to use his ID, but it said that a few days before Jimmy went missing, he was trying to assume a new identity. Now, Jimmy is still missing, but 18-year-old Jerome Young, who got popped trying to rob a coin shop in East Point, said he had just seen Jimmy at another coin shop on Ponce de Leon. After that, another man called and said he saw Jimmy at a club on Peter Street. Jimmy's body was found in a Chattahoochee. His body was missing all of his clothes except his underwear. His cause of death was asphyxiation. Now, a little bit about Jimmy Payne. During the investigation, when they found his body, he was found on his face and his body was swelled as if he was in the river going for a swim and he just happened to drown. Not that somebody did something especially heinous to him. It simply looked like he was in the water and he happened to drown. Hold on to that tidbit. William Billy Star Barrett, age 17, lived on 2nd Ave with his family. He was known to hang out with Luby Jeter and often hung out with him at a store on Memorial Drive. William was last seen at the McDaniel Glen Community Center paying a bill for his mother. A neighbor reportedly saw him a little later in the Kirkwood/East Lake area getting into a 2-door car with a black man carrying a purse. While William was missing, a young boy said he was offered $3,000 to kill William. And William's aunt and cousin said Wayne Williams had been at their house a little bit before this. On May 12th, Williams' body was found by FBI agents on the curb. A 32-year-old man named Harold Wood ran out of gas about 1 mile away from where ran out of gas about 1 mile away from where Williams' body was found. And instead of just questioning the man, the police took it upon themselves to arrest this man to get him to the station to question him. Wood told the police he saw a black man with a blue Cadillac standing where the body was found and stared at him before he drove away. The police said this was a matched description to the man who found Williams' body. Williams' cause of death was asphyxiation by strangulation. White animal hairs were found on the body. He was fully clothed but missing his faded blue jean jacket, a East Lake Meadows Boys Club card, 2 Willie Johnson Paint Company cards, and a Boy Scout pocket knife. There was also a post-mortem stab wound. A number was found in his pocket that was traced back to a white man who was last seen at the Omni and at the 5 Points MARTA station picking up boys. A waitress saw Williams at this man's house over a week before he went missing, and it's also stated that Luby Jeter used to be at this house as well. Nathaniel Cater, age 27, lived in the Falcon Hotel on Lucky Street. Nathaniel worked for the Adaman Labor Pool, and he also worked as a man of the night and solicited himself and his goodies at the Silver Dollar Saloon and the Cameo Lounge. Thursday, May 21st, 1981, Nate was reportedly last seen at the entrance of the Rialto Theater holding hands with Wayne Williams. After that, he was seen near the bus station after leaving the Cameo Lounge. A running buddy of Nate said he saw him on May 23rd with one of his customers from the Cameo Lounge. And another person said they saw Nate on a date around 2:30 that afternoon. The last sighting of Nate was by his friend Tightrope, who saw him entering the Healy building. Nate's body was found by 2 boys fishing down the Chattahoochee. Clothing, a Thompson machine gun, and a safe was all found near Nate's body. The police never released what was in that safe. Nate's body was found naked, and his cause of death was asphyxiation. He also had a bullet wound to his right shoulder. After Nate had been found and identified, his roommate John Healy came into the labor pool scared and crying that he was next. He said a week before, a white man in a suit and a black man in expensive sports clothes came by several times looking for Nate. Also aiding with the police investigation was Nate's mother and sister, who claimed they saw Wayne Williams with Nate on May 25th. This was a full day after Nate had been found, which was 2 full days before they suspected Wayne to have dropped him in the Chattahoochee. They later recanted and said they actually saw him on the 18th. And last but not least, we have John Harold Porter lived with his grandmother before having to turn himself in to the Georgia State Penitentiary, where he was later transferred to the Georgia Regional Hospital for mental issues. He got out and went back to his grandmother's house, but she kicked him out when he molested a 3-year-old. He then moved in with his mother. When him and his mother would get into spats or disagreements, he would go live with James Charles Gates, who they call Old Man, in an empty bando apartment. Old Man was once charged with the killing of Angela Bacon, but was later cleared when the police only checked one of his cars when both of his cars matched the description. So essentially, Old Man had 2 of the same cars. The police came, did some fake investigation, looked at one of the cars. They probably asked him, hey, which car can we test? If I'm a criminal, I'm going to tell you the car I didn't do the crime in. They tested it. They found nothing. They let him go. Porter's body was found in a vacant lot, stabbed up on the sidewalk and prepped on the steps. His cause of death was listed as multiple stab wounds. 30 murders over 23 months, primarily targeting Black children and young adults in Atlanta. As you can believe, had the city shook and left a lasting impact on its culture, politics, and social dynamics. The handling of these cases played a significant role in shaping the Atlanta we know and some love today, often referred to as the crown jewel of the South. However, the journey to get to this status was fought with systematic inequalities and community unrest. At the time of the murders, Atlanta was undergoing a significant transformation. The city aimed to present itself as a progressive hub of the South, fostering growth and inclusivity, fostering growth and inclusivity, fostering growth and inclusivity. However, the promise of prosperity often excluded the city's poor Black communities, revealing the smoke behind the mirrors of the marketed myth of progress and the harsh realities of what it really was. This case put the spotlight on all those disparities facing the city to confront its underlying social and economic divisions. Atlanta in the 70s and 80s was deeply segregated. Hell, the Atlanta of the day is just starting to move towards a less segregated place because of gentrification and transplants, with communities often sticking to their own racial and social economic groups. The murders exposed the fractures within the city as the lower class Black community felt abandoned by law enforcement and city officials. This distrust was exacerbated by the slow response to the growing number of missing and murdered children, leading many in the Black community to believe they were under attack. The tragedy sparked a wave of activism and unity within Atlanta's Black community because threaded into our very DNA as African Americans, even more Southern African Americans, we know if we want something done, we oftentimes have to do it ourselves. Help and handouts often skip over the very people that built this country. Leaders like Camille Bell, who founded the Committee to Stop Children Murders, emerged as a strong advocate, applying pressure on law enforcement and city leaders. Her efforts highlighted the power of grassroots movements to affect change, even in the face of institutional resistance. Miss Camille was a bad woman. Pull up a chair and let me tell you how she went from grieving mother to fierce advocate. Miss Camille was the mother of 9-year-old Yusuf Bell and was forced into activism after her son became one of the earliest victims of the Atlanta child murders. His death shattered Camille's world, but also ignited a fire within to seek justice for him and other children whose lives were senselessly taken. The Committee to Stop Children Murders was a grassroots organization made up of mostly grieving parents and concerned community members, became the central force in demanding accountability and action. Camille's leadership in CSCM was instrumental in pushing law enforcement to do their damn job, to prioritize these cases and treat the victims with dignity rather than dismissing their deaths as isolated incidents or unrelated crimes. Camille's activism was marked by her determination to hold public officials accountable. She frequently appeared at press conferences, community meetings, and rallies, calling attention to the systematic neglect and racial disparities that allowed the murders to persist for so long. Her advocacy also extended to providing emotional support for other grieving families, creating a network of strength amid the community's fear and despair. Camille's relentless pursuit of justice brought national attention to the murders and put a major light and focus on the racial and social inequalities that contributed to the response from authorities. Her efforts not only pressured law enforcement into action, but also empowered the Black community in Atlanta to unite against injustice. Camille's work with the CSCM remains a powerful reminder of how tragedy can transform into a catalyst for change. She ensured that the life of Yusuf and the other victims would not be forgotten. She set a precedent for how communities can and should mobilize in the face of a crisis. The CSCM work ultimately made everyone face the music and the reality of what was really going on. The case revealed the strengths but also the weaknesses within Atlanta city government and leadership, including the mayor, police chief, and elected officials who were newly and firstly elected Blacks and were often criticized for lack of urgency and reliance on controversial methods such as psychics and fiber evidence. Now y'all, apparently this lady, not even from Georgia, called and said, hey, I'm psychic, and when they allowed that psychic to come for at least 2 months, they were just driving around psychics, taking them to the places where these bodies had been found to let them do woo-woo magic, only to come up with zero. Just wasted time and more bodies popping up. These shortcomings ultimately led to increased scrutiny of leadership and reshaped how future administrations approached public safety and community relations. It eventually improved, but many questions remained unanswered. In recent years, the reopening of the investigation by former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms and the statement from former Atlanta Police Chief Erica Shields acknowledging the likelihood of other suspects reflect an ongoing quest for justice and closure. These efforts also serve as a reminder of the systematic failures that allowed the murders to continue for so long and the lasting impacts it had on the family, the community, and the city itself. Today's Atlanta stands as a symbol of resilience and growth, but the scars of the Atlanta child murder era remains. The case is a stark reminder of the need for accountability, equality, and community trust in shaping the future of any city. While Atlanta has become a cultural and economic powerhouse, the lesson from this dark chapter in history continues to resonate, urging vigilance and advocacy for those who are often overlooked. As the murders continued to terrorize the community, residents mobilized in extraordinary ways to protect the children, find justice for the victims, and demand accountability from the authorities. Against the backdrop of distrust and neglect, grassroots initiatives and individual acts of courage became lifelines for a community under siege. Amid mounting fear and frustration, over 600 volunteers took to the street to search for the missing children. These were not trained investigators, not police officers, but concerned citizens, often neighbors or family members of the victims and students from the local HBCU colleges. Their efforts were met with resistance from police who were weary of untrained civilians disrupting investigations. Despite these tensions, the volunteers pressed on, driven by a deep sense of responsibility and urgency. They combed wooded areas, vacant lots, and neighborhoods, often discovering clues or remains that would otherwise have gone unnoticed. Start tying some stuff up for y'all. Remember our girl LaTanya, during one of these searches, the team told the police, hey, this is where we're going. The police told them, hey, we don't need you guys to check the area. We were just there yesterday. We searched, it's nothing there. They did not listen to the police. They went anyway. And they were in that field for 10 minutes before they stumbled upon LaTanya's body, where she had been since the night the neighbor saw the men go into that window 4 times. So either the police did not go to the field, they did not look in the field, or they did not care in the field. But what we do know is she was in that field for months. And had they listened to the police, she probably would have been there for years. They often discovered clues and remains that would otherwise have gone unnoticed, like LaTanya was definitely going to. Their determination underscored the community's resilience and commitment to protecting its own in the face of institutionalized indifference. The community didn't stop at search efforts. They organized to proactively safeguard neighborhoods. 2 notable groups were the Guardian Angels, who were a citizen safety group originally from New York City. They arrived in Atlanta to patrol the streets, escort children to and from school, and serve as a visible deterrent to potential predators. Recognizable in their red berets and jackets, they offered a sense of security during a time of pervasive fear. The Guardian Angels are still active today. I just seen their leader on the news. They are up in New York patrolling the Metro bus, walking the trains to make sure that people are safe. They are still doing the good work. Shout out to the Guardian Angels. We also had the Bat Patrol, were residents who took it up a notch and took matters into their own hands, forming armed neighborhood watches. These volunteers patrolled the streets with baseball bats and other makeshift weapons, determined to confront anyone they deemed suspicious. While the Guardian Angels were escorting kids to school, making sure they were safe, the Bat Patrol was about that business. And if they didn't know why you was in their neighborhood and they asked why you were here and you did not give them an answer, no, it was an ass whooping on the other side of that question. The police didn't like that. They came and took the leader to jail, told him that he could not walk in the neighborhood with weapons. And he simply told them he was a veteran. I am protecting my people. Police didn't like that. They eventually locked him up. They had to disband the Bat Patrol. While community involvement was robust, it was complicated by a deep mistrust of law enforcement. Decades of systematic racism and police brutality left many parents weary of involving authorities in their children's lives. Some even warned their children not to trust the police, fearing they may be targeted, blamed, or ignored, with many parents believing that it could only have been police or someone dressed as police that was able to lure so many of these young kids away, acting as a trusting unit of the community. The pastor, the police, the doctor, someone that kids are supposed to be able to trust. But this distrust often hindered cooperation between law enforcement and the community, further complicating efforts to share information and coordinate strategies. It also meant that many families turned inward, relying on the grassroots networks and community leaders rather than the official channels and support for guidance. The case became such a big deal that superstars of the Black community outside of Atlanta rallied to the case. The late great Muhammad Ali offered a $40,000 reward for information leading to the resolution of the case, and the Michael Jackson donated $100,000 specifically to support the investigation and assist the affected families. His contribution aimed to provide resources during a time of crisis. Their generosity brought national attention to the murders and showed the dire need for answers. This was a horrific chapter, but revealed the strength and solidarity of a community fighting to protect its children. From local volunteers to high-profile advocates, these efforts demonstrated the power of collective action. Wayne Williams. I know I've said his name a lot. Y'all probably like, who is that man? Let me tell you about him. Wayne Bertram Williams is the central figure in this case, a man whose arrest and subsequent conviction for 2 adult murders linked him to the broader investigation into the deaths of the other victims. While Williams has consistently maintained his innocence, his life before the murders and the circumstances surrounding his arrest paint a complex portrait of an individual whose personality and actions have been the subject of intense scrutiny. Wayne was born on May 27, 1958, and grew up in the Dixie Hills neighborhood, a predominantly Black middle-class neighborhood. He was the son of teachers. He was described as bright and ambitious with an intense interest in radio broadcasting and music production. From a young age, Wayne demonstrated technical aptitude, building his own radio station equipment and broadcasting from his home. This early fascination with electronics and communications made him something of a local prodigy, earning respect within his community for his skills. By his late teens, early 20s, Wayne had developed a reputation as an aspiring music producer and talent scout. He frequently boasted about his connections in the entertainment industry, claiming he was on the verge of launching successful careers for local artists. However, many of these claims were exaggerated, and his efforts to establish a foothold in music began to fall short. Some acquaintances later described him as a wannabe with grandiose dreams that didn't align with reality. I mean, you have to start somewhere. Wayne was thinking big. He was speaking it into existence. He was manifesting what he wanted. I'm sure it's somebody that say the same thing about Quincy Jones, Smokey Robinson, Clive Davis. They said, who these fools think they are? But look at them, right? You never know. But you have to start somewhere, and Wayne was trying to get it started. Wayne's ambition, coupled with his nonchalant and arrogant demeanor, often led people to simply not liking his off-putting personality. Sometimes that's okay. Everybody's not gonna like you, and everything ain't for everybody. And I think that was a lesson that was taught in Wayne's household. So when people didn't like him, he just kept it on pushing. Despite this, many of these same people who didn't like Wayne admittedly gave him credit for being intelligent and personable, just with the overinflated sense of self-importance. This mix of qualities, quirkiness, ambition, technical skill, and tendency towards self-aggrandizement made him a complicated and polarizing figure, especially once the media got a hold of this story. Wayne was known for his confidence and his ability to talk his way into any situation, a trait that served him as well as raised suspicions about him. He often portrayed as someone with insider knowledge and authority, traits that played into his alleged ability to lure young kids to feel comfortable with him. However, those who knew Wayne described him as more of a nuanced personality, a man who often flipped between charming and confrontational, friendly and aloof. His behavior during the investigation and trial further showcased his complex personality. He maintained his innocence with vigor and clashed with law enforcement and reporters. His courtroom demeanor was perceived as defiant and dismissive, which may have influenced public perception and jury deliberations. Before they officially locked Wayne up, he was what you would call a police chaser or ambulance chaser. He was on the CB radios. He was always listening. If it was an accident, Wayne was there with his camera taking pictures. If the ambulance was going somewhere, something happened, Wayne was there taking pictures. Wayne was no stranger to the police. He was no stranger to the media. And remember, most of these kids participated in those talent shows. Wayne would also go to the talent shows, hand out flyers, tell them, you want to get signed in my record label? Come on down to my house and you can record. He had a group. They actually did recordings. So everything that he said he was doing just that. He might have made it seem like he was bigger than he actually was. In a dramatic turn of events in early 19, the task force had to intensify their efforts in finding this killer, focusing on bridges spanning over the Chattahoochee River, since that's where the later victims were popping up. Their strategy stemmed from a theory that the killer was dumping bodies in the water to obscure evidence, meaning if I throw them in the water, this gonna wash off any fingerprints, anything that could possibly be linked back to me. Over 14 bridges were monitored during this operation, but results were sparse until May 22nd, 1981, on the final night of surveillance. I want y'all to know they was out there for 30 days and 30 nights every night. So they had maybe 300 officers and agents a night monitoring these bridges. No bodies popped up. They didn't catch nobody until the last night. On the final night of the surveillance, agents stationed under the bridge allegedly heard a splash and observed a car on top of the bridge going 3 miles per hour. Who was driving the car? Wayne Williams was driving the car. He was stopped and he was questioned. Police asked where he was going. He told them he was headed to check out a client's house to see where she lived because he had a meeting with her at 8 o'clock in the morning and he wanted to make sure that he didn't get lost. He wanted to make sure that he knew where he was going. Wayne said at this moment, they asked him, why were you on the bridge? That was the answer that he gave. And they started searching his car. He said he kept a pair of gloves in his glove compartment. They pulled the gloves out, sat him on the front seat. He said that they found a ligature outside of the car and officers were attempting to put it in the car, but being outspoken Wayne, he made sure to tell them, hey, I see you. Make sure you keep that rope outside my car and remember where you found it. They were trying to say that Wayne tossed the body over that bridge. This man was 5'6", maybe 120 pounds. They're saying he was rolling 3 miles per hour, got out, dragged a dead body out his car, threw it over the bridge, got back in the car before the body reached the river at the bottom and started back driving the car where they could see the lights. And he did all of this in 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. See what I'm talking about? All the officers go to the bottom, look to see what was tossed over the bridge. Wayne said he didn't toss anything. They searched for 30 minutes. They didn't see anything. With no evidence, they had to let him go. But this is where all hell started for Wayne, his family, everybody involved. 2 days later, the body of Nathaniel Cater was discovered downstream, which the police claimed directly linked Williams to the scene. This pivotal moment shifted the investigation squarely until Wayne Williams and ultimately led to his arrest. Wayne was only convicted of the murders of Nathaniel Cater and Jimmy Ray Payne. I want y'all to remember, before we got to the trial, Jimmy Ray drowned. Once they got Wayne and said he threw Nathaniel Cater, they then said Jimmy Ray Payne didn't drown. Wayne also killed him. Authorities attributed many of the child murders based on circumstantial evidence and his connection to some of the victims. This decision to close the broader case without additional convictions remains controversial to this day, with critics arguing that the evidence tying him to the child victims was circumstantial at best. Since his incarceration, Wayne has maintained his innocence and actively sought to clear his name. He has filed numerous appeals and participated in interviews where he has pointed out what he sees as flaws in the case against him. Advocates for the victims and their families question whether it's Wayne at all. And if it is Wayne, did he act alone or was it other perpetrators involved? Wayne remains a divisive figure. To some, he's a scapegoat caught in a racially charged investigation. To others, and by others I mean the police, y'all, he is a manipulative killer who preyed on young people. The investigation into the murders unfolded against the backdrop of the highest homicide rate that Atlanta had ever seen, limited resources, and strained relationships between law enforcement and the community. What began as investigations into isolated cases of missing children soon revealed a terrifying pattern, sparking a multi-agency effort to bring justice. As y'all heard me say many times about the investigation, it was a major delayed recognition of a crisis. Early days of the investigation was nothing but lack of coordination and resources. The Atlanta Police Department, overwhelmed by the city's rising crime rate, initially assigned just 3 officers to handle these missing person cases. And the officers that they appointed had never worked murder cases. These were people who are like traffic and beat cops, and they assigned them to work missing and murdered children cases. They didn't know left from right. They had no idea what was going on. These officers were ill-equipped to manage the growing number of reports, especially as the victims were Black children from low-income neighborhoods whose disappearances were often dismissed or mischaracterized. It took months of relentless advocacy for authorities to acknowledge a pattern. By the time the 9th body was discovered in the mid-1980s, the murders had become impossible to ignore, prompting officials to take action and actually attempt to investigate something. Now, I don't know if y'all are podcast listeners like me, but right here, right now, I have to give my girl, Miss Renee Davis, one of my favorite podcasters over at the Melanated Mayhem, her flowers real quick, because I was listening to one of her episodes and she said these people made a super duper task force, and baby, let me tell you, super duper, they definitely cooked up one right here. So again, Miss Renee Davis, the country girl, thank you. Our super duper task force, once the authorities realized and recognized the severity of the crisis at hand, the APD partnered with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation on July 17th, 1980 to form a super duper task force. And they artfully called this task force Atlanta Missing and Murdered Task Force, which was dedicated to solving the case. This task force aimed to centralize efforts, but it still struggled with conflicting theories and limited leads. These 2 agencies still couldn't figure out how to work this case, let alone solve it. They were clocking in, getting paid to do absolutely nothing. After 4 months, the FBI officially joined the investigation on November 6, 1980, but their early involvement was controversial and upsetting, to say the least. The FBI immediately came in on good bullshit. They turned the focus to the parents of the victims, operating under the assumption that the killings could be linked to domestic abuse and neglect. This misdirection frustrated community members who felt like the real threat, an active serial killer, was being ignored. Bad police work transformed into even worse evidence work. A significant breakthrough came with the discovery of the fiber. They first found a fiber on the shoe of Eric Middlebrooks. One officer decided to take this piece of fiber from Eric Middlebrooks' shoe to test past victims to see if they had any fibers on them that match this fiber, as well as future victims. Investigators linked the material found to Wayne Williams' environment, so his home, his car, his studio. And over time, more fiber and more dog hairs were found, and more fiber and more dog hairs were analyzed, creating a web of circumstantial evidence that prosecutors would later use to implicate Williams in the death of Nathaniel Cater and Jimmy Ray Payne. After Wayne was arrested and the Super Duper Task Force was slapping skins, high-fiving, bumping chests, that their very minimal amount of work actually led to an arrest. That's when an FBI agent who was sitting in training listening to the evidence that they attempted to present went to his boss and said, "Not so fast. I have concerns about the reliability and the scientific integrity of the fiber evidence. That's going to be the cornerstone of this case." Fiber analysis was used extensively to link all of these victims together, and it came under scrutiny for several reasons. Reason one, questionable lab practices. The FBI whistleblower expressed that the lab equipment used during the fiber analysis was outdated and faulty, potentially compromising the results. This raised doubts about whether the fibers found on the victims truly matched those from Wayne's environment. Reason two, lab technicians overstated the evidence and the conclusiveness of the fiber matches. While the analysis could suggest that the fibers found on the victims were consistent with those from Wayne, it could not definitely prove that they came from those sources. This nuance was not made clear to the jury. What they did was get these big old poster boards, and they're telling people multiply this fiber times 1,000 minus 200, you'll get a probability of 1 bajillion that it came from Wayne Williams' house. When I watched the footage of how they explained it, I immediately said they are in court doing monkey math and this makes no sense. But they talked about it for so long and they spoke with so much diction. Reason number three. The fiber evidence relied on the argument that certain fibers found at the crime scene was rare. However, experts have noted that no statistical data was presented to show how rare these fibers actually were. Leaving room for doubt, they were saying this green carpet was from a warehouse in North Carolina. They only made 300 rooms of carpet, this particular green carpet. They shipped out this 300 carpets to 30 states. So they're saying each state, if it was equal, if each state got 10, then that means only 10 houses in the entire state of Georgia could have this green carpet. And what's the probability that of the 10 houses that are in Georgia, that it happens to be Wayne Williams' house? That is how they presented it to the jury. That is not what happened. When they went to the factory said, "We don't have the full manifest of where this carpet went. We only have 300 sales and we don't know where those 300 went. So all 300 could have came to Georgia and 95 could have came to Georgia. We don't know because they didn't present it in court, but they knew that the warehouse told them before they presented it in court." And reason four, leaned heavily on hair from his carpet, car, and even his dog. It was circumstantial, but there were no eyewitness testimony or direct evidence linking Wayne to the murders. Before I go too far, when they tested the dog hairs, it came back that the hairs were 100% from an Alaskan Husky. Wayne had a German Shepherd. They said those white hairs came from the undercarriage of his German Shepherd, and sometimes German Shepherd fur can look like Alaskan Husky fur. Years later, reports surfaced that the FBI exaggerated or fabricated hair and fiber analysis. If they lied before, what's to say they didn't lie here? This has fueled ongoing skepticism. The fiber evidence was emphasized to secure a conviction, but critics argue it overshadowed bigger issues like alternate suspects. And while Wayne was convicted of 2 murders, most of the cases remained unsolved. For many, this trial was a mix of victory and failure. A conviction, yes, but also a stark reminder of how the system often fails marginalized communities. Now we're going to take it to the trial. We are now in session. We are now on the docket. Norman S. Fletcher Slaton, the district attorney for Fulton County, played a significant role in the prosecution of Wayne. Initially, Slaton was cautious about linking Wayne to murders without sufficient evidence. Slaton was not a stranger to the cameras. Every time they put a mic in his face, he was talking. They were asking, are you going to lock him up? When are you going to lock him up? And Slaton was saying, I don't think we're going to lock him up because we don't have the evidence. We don't have enough evidence. We don't have enough evidence. I counted the times. The man said it about 25 times on the news and on the radio that he did not have enough evidence. He often could be heard saying that he didn't plan to prosecute Wayne because the evidence, this is the same evidence he would later take him to trial on, by the way. He was saying the evidence wasn't strong enough and he wanted the task force to keep investigating to find better leads and solid evidence. This proclamation did not sit well with the powers that be, and Slaton was summoned to the governor's mansion to have a old big boy meeting. Who was in the meeting, Tam? So it was then Governor George Busby, Ronald Reagan, and then Vice President George Bush Sr. And they had him in there for 7 hours. The reported purpose of the meeting was to address the escalating pressures on authorities and to solve the case amid public fear and growing distrust in the justice system. It's also reported that the discussion revolved around the status of the investigation, emerging evidence, and how best to communicate developments with the public. Some suggested the meeting included conversations about the controversial strategy of tying multiple murders to a single suspect and the fiber evidence that had central and total focus of the case against Wayne. The private nature of this meeting fueled speculation, with critics arguing it might have influenced how the investigation and prosecution were directed. No one was in the room where it happened. But what we do know after that meeting, once the fiber and circumstantial ties to the 2 adult murders were presented, he became convinced that Wayne Williams was the primary suspect and he was ready to take it to trial. Slaton's approach during the trial was strategic. He chose the 2 adult murders rather than the child murders directly, citing the fiber evidence was a way to establish a pattern of behavior that could connect Wayne to the broader series of killings. This tactic allowed the prosecution to introduce evidence from multiple child cases to suggest a broader narrative of Wayne's guilt, even though he wasn't formally charged with those crimes. Slaton's position reflected the immense pressure the city was under to resolve the case. While he publicly expressed confidence in the evidence he presented, critics and defense attorneys alike argued that the focus on Williams might have overlooked other potential suspects and motives. This continues to fuel debates about whether the trial was about achieving justice or it was just about closing this case and shutting the people up. The trial of Wayne Williams kicked off on January 6, 1982, and it was a sight to see. Snipers on the top, police everywhere you look, local news, national news, international news. Everybody was there. They had 50 seats in the galley for people to watch. It was thousands of people vying for those 50 seats every day. And it quickly became one of the most talked about cases in Atlanta's history. Prosecutors took him to trial for the deaths of Nathaniel Cater and Jimmy Ray Payne. But there was a twist. They introduced evidence linking him to 10 of the child murders as part of a pattern. All of the initial cases, if I didn't say is unsolved, they linked all of those to him through a pattern, including the last guy that was found in the ditch. He was even charged with that murder because they said it was a part of the pattern. Prosecutors claimed that the fiber hairs and the dog solely linked Wayne to the victims. At the time, this evidence was groundbreaking, almost like something out of a CSI episode. They were seeing things they never saw before. Then there was the infamous bridge incident. Williams' defense had their work cut out for them. They argued the evidence was weak and purely circumstantial. no eyewitnesses, no motives, no hard proof. Nothing tied Wayne directly to the child murders or the murders of Nathaniel Cater and Jimmy Ray Payne. They also pointed out the questionable handling of the evidence and suggested contamination could also have been an issue. And then there's the bigger question. Was this trial about justice, or was this trial about finding somebody to blame? The defense suggested that racial bias and the intense pressure to solve this case led to Wayne becoming the scapegoat. In the end, Wayne was convicted of the 2 adult murders and sentenced to 2 life sentences. The state considered the Atlanta child murder solved. Once they convicted Wayne, they shut down the super duper task force and completely stopped investigating, not even a week later. The community was not sure. Some believed Wayne was not guilty. Others thought he was set up to close the case. Even now, decades later, people are still debating whether justice was truly served. I mean, I'm here talking y'all head off. So, was Wayne guilty? Was he the fall guy? The racial tension was high and the city was on edge. The dynamics of the case created a fertile ground for suspicion and fear. Many in the Black community suspected that the killings were racially motivated, possibly carried out by the Klan. This suspicion was not without basis given the history and racial violence in the South and the targeting of young Black victims. Skepticism started early when it came to Wayne. His arrest and conviction brought little closure to many families. Wayne immediately went to work and started working on his appeals. And baby, this appeal is a doozy. I could not believe my mind blown. Boom. Leaving me with the question, was it a fair fight for justice or a quest to uphold a conviction? So imagine, his appeal lawyer is already dealing with his really big personality, trying to figure out how he is going to present this case, finding a team that knows Georgia law that can also fight the good fight for him. And one day he's walking into his office and it's a package on his steps. Now y'all, when I first seen the package, I thought it was a bomb. I thought my boy was finna be barbecue chicken, but it was not that. It was pages and pages and pages and pages of police work and police investigation. Inside was evidence that showed the lack of investigation, cover up, and also factual proof of the Klan's involvement in this case. Now, this package didn't have any names on it, but Wayne's appeal lawyer believed it came from Detective Aubrey Milton, and here's how it played out. Over the decades, his legal team had filed multiple appeals, citing new evidence, alleged investigative misconduct, and flaws in the prosecution's case. The basis of his appeals were plentiful. Critics have pointed out significant flaws in fiber analysis, including unreliable scientific methods. They accused prosecutors of withholding evidence that could have supported alternative suspects. The report suggested the FBI had intelligence that linked the Klan to some of the murders, but this information was never presented in trial. Allegations of racial and political motivations was also brought up, stating that the racially charged environment of the trial led to Williams being unfairly targeted as the scapegoat to ease public fears and to prevent racial unrest. Defense has argued that the overwhelming pressure to close the case led to confirmation bias and a narrow focus on Wayne as the sole suspect. And last but not least, faulty hair evidence. In 2015, the FBI admitted the errors in hair analysis during Wayne's trial. A review of the case revealed that the hair evidence presented as conclusive during the trial lacked the scientific certainty claimed by prosecutors. Wayne's legal team has argued his revelation undermines the prosecution's narrative and warrants a new trial. That hair came from an Alaskan Husky, and in 2015, they officially confirmed that that was true. And also, they eventually tested those Caucasian hairs that had also been found on multiple victims. I don't know if y'all seen the pictures. Wayne ain't no Caucasian man. During Wayne's first appeal, there was a strong suggestion that the Klan had been involved in these murders, though it was not fully investigated at the time of the trial. This theory has persisted due to several pieces of evidence that came out during the appeal. There were rumors and reports throughout the investigation that suggested the KKK had been involved in targeting Black children in Atlanta. In the 90s, a former Klan member, Gary T. Thomas, came forward claiming to have knowledge of the Klan's involvement, which added another layer of suspicion to this already suspicious case. Thomas distanced himself from the Klan by then, alleged that Klan members were directly responsible for the murders of the Black children in Atlanta between 1979 and 1981. According to him, the Sonder brothers of Forsyth County, known Klan members, targeted and killed the children as part of a racist agenda, hoping to send a fear-inducing message to the Black community. His testimony suggested a well-coordinated effort by the Sonders to carry out the killings. While testifying, he hinted at police complicity, either participating or protecting these members because they too were racist and a part of the Klan. This was compounded by the fact that Thomas had went undercover and wore a wire around the Saunders brothers after he reported that he thought they had something to do with it to a detective, Joe Jackson. He wanted to unburden himself. He agreed to work with the FBI and wear a wire to speak to one of the Saunders brothers. Gary claims Saunders confessed to picking up children in neighborhoods and dropping them at the locations in which the bodies were being found. Saunders also admitted to making the phone calls related to the abductions. Thomas also revealed that Saunders had a basement full of police and utility worker uniforms, which would have allowed him to blend in unnoticed, along with the Alaskan Husky. I don't know if I need to say this, but he was also a Caucasian. The witness testimony added weight to the growing belief that there were elements within the investigation intentionally hindering progress. Joe Jackson, who was the lead investigator, he made huge missteps. When he went to talk to the Saunders brothers, he told them that they were being watched, and he told them that they were being recorded, and told that tapes of this conversation existed. The brothers was immediately able to tell Jackson that they knew it was Gary Thomas that was reporting all of this information. This meeting happened before Wayne Williams was arrested, which means this information was known to the Super Duper Task Force. So APD, the GBI, the FBI all knew that these wiretaps were had and that this person had said that he did these things. This should have been given to the defense as evidence in the trial. When Jackson testified, he mostly didn't recall anything pertaining to this case, which is wild because this was the biggest case of the time. Admittedly, he said this was the biggest case of his career, so how do you not remember? He was later asked about the recordings, and shockingly, he revealed to everyone in that courtroom that he had destroyed them. When asked about the transcript to the destroyed tapes, he said none existed. They asked, why didn't they exist? He said, I didn't make any. I didn't think that anything important was on the tapes. And so they said, did you listen to the tapes? And he said no. This led to further questions about Jackson's role in the case and sparked allegations that he might have ties to the Klan. While the direct link between the Klan and the murders were never definitely proved, this was just added fuel to the fire to the questions and suspicions about the handling of this case. This appeal took place in 1993, and despite these arguments, Wayne's appeal was denied to grant him a new trial. In 2006, another denied appeal. In the 2006 case, the judge on the panel that was holding out and he was going to grant him a trial, he said that he received the call from then President George Bush Sr. that told him, don't do it, don't think about it, your career will be over. So he had no choice but to vote against giving Wayne a new trial. He did go to his deathbed saying that Wayne deserved a new trial. DNA testing for Fulton County conducted a test on the hairs as well as those fibers. And instead of saying it did not match, they gave some BS talking about doesn't conclusively include him, but it also doesn't conclusively not include him. He's up for parole again in 2027. And now, remember when I told y'all about the super duper task force that helped bring Wayne Williams to what they claimed was justice? What if I told y'all there was another task force that had been working in the background in tandem the entire time? The alternate task force was solely to investigate the Klan and simply known as the Klan Task Force. This task force was created to investigate Klan involvement in the murders, and there was widespread speculation of their involvement. This task force was ran by a combination of local and federal law enforcement, APD, FBI, CIA, GBI. All of the big boy organizations was all on this here task force. Despite having little evidence linking Wayne to the murders with the original task force, the Klan task force had lots of evidence that they should have been investigating, but ultimately wasn't. The Klan task force was actively investigating tips that they were finding. And this is why I believe this should have been given more attention, because real police work was happening on the Klan task force because it was a secret. No one knew about it. So all of the tips in the investigations that they were getting were actual tips and actual things that needed to be investigated. But because this didn't play to the outcome of the powers that be for the state of Georgia, it was swept under the rug, and the Klan task force would have never been known had it not been for Aubrey Milton dropping that package on the doorsteps of Wayne lawyers. Now, while we know that they were just creating task force like no one's business, it should also be known that with multiple task force led to multiple task force failures. The full investigation was plastered by a series of controversial decisions, missteps, and disagreements over methodology that ultimately undermined the effectiveness of the investigation. One of the most contentious aspects of the task force work was the creation and management of a list of potential victims. In the early stages of the investigation, a list was compiled of children and young adults who were believed to be possible victims based on various criteria such as age, race, and demographic location. However, the task force decision to include individuals on this list, even though they had clear causes of death unrelated to the suspected serial killings, led to controversy. This list blurred the lines between genuine victims and others who had died under different circumstances. Some families felt their loved ones were unfairly included on the list, while others believed that critical cases were overlooked. This not only sparked frustration, but also fueled suspicion about the accuracy and thoroughness of the investigation. Another significant failure was the disagreement between the task force regarding the methodology used to determine links between the murders. The task force relied heavily on forensics. However, the evidence was frequently challenged by outside experts who criticized its credibility. Some members of the task force were accused of being too eager to make a connection between the murders. The internal disagreements and mismanagement with the task force not only led to delays of the resolution of the case, but also contributed to an atmosphere of chaos and confusion. And that, you guys, is the story of the Atlanta missing and murdered children. I just want to thank you guys for rocking with me on my first episode. I'm still working it out, still working through the kinks. We're going to get a little bit better. But I just want to reflect on the case. As you guys can see, it is a longer episode. I have been entrenched in this case for a very, very, very long time. And just to advocate for Wayne Williams, because I truthfully don't believe he did it. I don't think he murdered any of them kids. I don't think he murdered Nathaniel Cater. I don't think he murdered Jimmy Ray Payne. And I stand in solidarity with all of the parents none of the parents, the ones that are still living, feel like Wayne Williams did this. Sometime during COVID, they had a community meeting. The parents that were still alive came to the meeting and they asked them, if you believe Wayne did this, raise your hand. None of them raised their hand. The man asked if you think he could possibly have something to do with it. A few hands went up. And the last question was if you think he definitely did it. One hand went up, and that was solely one of the investigators on this case who was the chaos and the confusion. I think with his parole coming up, I really think that they should free him. Former Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms has set up a memorial to these kids because up until there was nothing to give space to these lives, to show that they were here, to show that they were once with us. So they have a whole mural that people can go check out. If you live in Atlanta, if you visit Atlanta, if you're from Atlanta, go see it. Seek out just information. Just keep the conversation going, because while I think he should be free, I definitely think these parents should also get answers on what really happened to their kids, and the siblings should get answers on what happened to their brothers. I'm often left with the question, if these victims had been white, would authorities have acted differently? I 100% believe that they would definitely have acted differently. It wouldn't have hadn't gotten past one missing or murdered boy that showed up in the woods without his clothes being on. I don't think it would have ever gotten that far. Those are the things that we are grappling with in the year 2025. It's a move towards justice, but I think it starts with having these conversations. It starts with these podcasts. It starts with doing things like this. I just want to leave one word of wisdom with you all and just say that these stories matter because these lives matter, and I'll keep telling the truth. I am here as advocate for people that look like me. I am an advocate for African American women, African American men, African American kids, African American pets, anything African American. I am on the side of right, and I'm riding with my people till the wheels fall off. So I just hope that you guys join me next week. We will be discussing the Central Park 5, the Exonerated 5 case. And I just ask you all to roll with me. And until then, keep it peaceful and keep it black.